Hey everybody, Grandmaster Hafner here. Guess what? You made it to brown belt. And brown belt is really awesome because, first of all, it represents about the halfway point between white belt and black belt. And it also means that you're within 18 to 24 months of being in black belt camp, which we'll talk about in just a minute. I want to talk about three things that are a little bit different about brown belt training. The first of them is how the brown belt ranks work. Now, if you can imagine for a minute that this is the end of a belt, and this is October, and you or your child came in and tested for brown belt today, here's your brown belt. This brown belt is called a second GUP, G-U-P. And in the martial arts, the word GUP means level. And all of our belt colors have GUP numbers, but we haven't needed them until now. When you were a white belt, that was a 10th GUP, and when you got your yellow belt, that was a 9th GUP, gold belt was 8th GUP, and you've worked your way all the way down to second GUP brown belt. With your previous ranks, you actually got a different colored belt at each level, so we just sort of bypassed the GUP numbers, but as you see, now we're almost out of colors, and so we have to go back to using the GUP number. So this is October, you got your second GUP in January. If you attend all of your classes, you come back in here to belt promotion and test for stripe number 1 on your second GUP belt. In April, you come back in and test for stripe number 2 on your second GUP brown belt. And then in July, rather than testing for stripe number 3, you come back in and test for a whole new rank. Pardon my drawing here. You may have seen the brown belt that has a long black stripe running through it, and that's called first GUP. Now, assuming that you stay on track, you would be taking your first GUP test in July, and then you know how it works. In October, you're back here testing for stripe number 1 on your brown belt, and then in January, you're back here testing for stripe number 2 on your first GUP brown belt. Now, a couple of these last tests may not actually be taken, and I'll explain that in just a minute. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is the first GUP test, which is different from the tests you've taken up until this point for a couple of reasons. First of all, the first GUP test is done privately, and that means usually your family and me and maybe a couple other families where the kids or the students are taking their first GUP test. We schedule a private time. Oftentimes they're on Wednesday evening, and you all come in together and we go over into a corner of the classroom, and I test people for first GUP myself and kind of semi-privately. The other reason that the first GUP test is a little bit different is that it's the first time your son or daughter might take a test and not actually pass it on the first time. You know, once you get into black belt training, there are a whole bunch of things that you have to actually pass to move forward. And for us, first GUP is sort of the part that begins that part of the training. Now, it doesn't mean that you failed if you don't pass your first GUP test on the first time. It just means you come back in and take the test again. I'd say right now maybe about slightly more than half the people that take the first GUP test pass it on the first time, and the rest come back and pass it on the second time, sometimes even the third time. I think it's a positive no matter how you look at it. I think the people sometimes that have to redo that test come out of it a little bit stronger than those who pass it on the first try. The third thing I want to talk with you about is black belt camp, and you've probably heard about this before. And black belt camp is the process by which we prepare people to take the black belt test and to actually become promoted to black belt. It's not a day camp, it's not a go overnight and stay in a cabin camp. We're just talking about this high intensity process that we use here in the karate school. We run 2 black belt camps per year. One that starts about the end of January and finishes in May. And the other camp that we run begins in the beginning of August and finishes in November. Now, when you are in black belt camp, you are attending 4 classes per week. And I know that might sound like a lot, but two things. First of all, it is the high intensity part of our process. And the other thing is that it's set up so that you can do it in 3 visits. So usually somebody who's in black belt camp is attending 2 classes on one day and then coming their other 2 days separately. So you would be attending 4 actual group classes per week if you're in black belt camp. Now the camp that you go into depends on when you get your first GUP, and it works like this. To go into a camp in the January camp, you have to have your first GUP by the preceding October. To go into a camp that begins in August, you have to earn your first GUP by the preceding May. So to use the example that we put on the board earlier, it was for somebody that earns their first GUP in July of next year. And if that person earns their first GUP July of next year, that means they would be eligible for the camp that, because they got it by October, they would be eligible for the camp that begins the following January. Now, not everybody goes into the first camp in which they become eligible, but using just this little system here, I think you'd understand what your earliest eligibility will be. As we get closer to that date, the teachers will begin working with you closely and talking about your schedule and talking about how you or your child is doing with the requirements. And working together, we would find the best date for you to actually join black belt camp.